Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Neurosci IQ. In this episode we are going to talk about whether cell phone usage can increase your risk of developing cancer, specifically increase your risk of developing brain cancer. So let's get started now. Before actually getting started, I just wanted to give you guys a brief overview of where this presentation is headed. First, we are going to talk about the different radiation on the electromagnetic spectrum. Then we can talk about mutations and their associations with cancer. And then we will discuss what the studies actually say. And then I will provide you guys with a brief conclusion and summary to end up. So here is basically a diagram of the electromagnetic spectrum, and as you can see there are waves with different wavelengths, different energies and different frequencies. On the right, such as we have the gamma rays and the x-rays if you look at the diagram, and these waves are more energetic and they have more energy to them. However, on the left, we have waves such as radio waves and microwaves, and these waves are said to be lower in energy and they do not carry as much energy as gamma rays or X-rays. Cell phones, to be clear, emit radio frequencies, so they are one of the lowest energy waves that we use in our daily lives. And they are basically to the left of the diagram if you look at the diagram. So now let's talk about radiation a little bit more. We have in general two types of radiation. We have non-ionizing radiation, but we also have ionizing radiation. And now you might be wondering what is the difference between these two types of radiation, and that would be a very good question to ask. Basically, non-ionizing radiation is lower in energy and it includes, for example, radio waves and microwaves. So cell phone usage definitely belongs in the non-ionizing radiation category. And as I mentioned, these waves have lower amounts of energy compared to ionizing radiation. And the defining characteristic of these types of radiation is that they do not carry enough energy with them to strip electrons from atoms or make them ionized. And what this basically means is that they cannot damage DNA directly, or at least we do not know any method that they could use to damage our DNA directly. However, perhaps there is a method that hasn't been discovered, or they can damage our DNA in direct methods, indirectly. But on the other hand, let's talk about ionizing radiation. These forms of radiation are more energetic and more powerful, and these include stuff such as gamma rays and X-rays. And the defining characteristics for these types of radiation is that they can ionize atoms, and also they can damage DNA directly and cause mutations in our genome. So definitely ionizing radiation is more harmful for us than non-ionizing radiation, since ionizing radiation carries more energy. So here is a brief diagram of how these types of waves can cause mutation. On the left side, we have the ionizing radiation. And if you see, there is an X-ray source and it's hitting the brain cells with a powerful beam. And later on, you can see the DNA that is demonstrated by the red and blue bases has degraded or has caused mutation in the DNA, which can lead to cancer later on, and it's definitely not good for us. On the other hand, we have the non-ionizing radiation on the right, and as you can see, cell phones emit radio frequencies, which is, as I mentioned, a type of non-ionizing radiation. And when you see the non-ionizing radiation, it actually does not alter the DNA and it remains intact, and most likely there is no mutations involved. And as you can see, non-ionizing radiation is a lot less harmful for us than ionizing radiation, since it doesn't or can't cause as many mutations. So now that we got here, let's talk about what does the scientific evidence show. Basically, there are two main methods that scientists can use to learn more about radio frequencies and its impact on our health. The first method is animal studies, and the second method is human studies. The animal studies includes, for example, stuff such as exposing rodents or other animals, for example, let's say mice or rats, to radio frequencies or radiation for long periods of time. And then we compare the mutation or cancer incidence between the mice or the rat group that got the radiation to mice that were in the control group and they basically didn't get the radiation. If the mice that developed more cancer, or there is like a higher incidence of brain cancer in mice that received radio frequencies compared to mice that didn't, then this could suggest potentially that radio frequencies are causing cancer in mice. In human studies, on the other hand, as you may know, it would be highly unethical for us to expose humans to any types of radiation. So we cannot expose humans to radiation. However, we can still learn about radio frequencies by studying people who have developed gliomas or other types of brain cancer and studying their cell phone usage. And we can compare these group of cancer patients and their cell phone usage or habits to healthy patients who do not have cancer. And we can see if higher levels of phone usage is associated with higher rates of cancer, or perhaps there is a link like that present. So now we can get actually started, and here is more information about the animal studies. There are two large studies that exposed rodents to radio frequencies similar to that of emitted by cell phones, basically for the majority of their lives since they were born until they died. Both studies interestingly found a significant increase in rare types of heart tumors, but this was only associated significantly in male rodents and not the female ones, which was very interesting because apparently the male ones were more at risk of developing cancer when exposed to radio frequencies. Furthermore, the National Toxicology Program actually showed, their study showed some evidence for tumors in the brain and adrenal glands of, again, male rodents and not female ones. So the most important thing to take away is that while studies have shown mixed results, basically the animal models are not generalizable to humans, and we cannot just assume based on these animal models that radio frequencies will have the same effects in humans. This is why human studies are very essential to learn more about radio frequencies, and that's why we are going to talk about another study that studies humans. Basically, for this part, we can talk about the interphone study, which is the largest and most well-known study of humans until now. Basically, why this study was conducted was to gather more evidence about the impacts of cell phone usage and brain cancer risk. And basically, it involved 13 countries and more than 5,000 participants in total. So as you can tell, this was a very large study and it was very resource intensive and informative for us. So basically what happened is that the researchers compared the cell phone use of patients with brain tumors such as gliomas to healthy controls or patients without cancer. And they covered a lot of different factors to see if there are different factors that could explain how cell phones could increase the risk of cancer. They covered factors such as frequency of calls, period of cell phone usage. So, for example, how long you have had a cell phone for, for example, 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, and all of that. And also length of calls. So, for example, were you on the phone for 1 minute on average, or 10 minutes, or 1 hour, which could perhaps have a differing effect on brain cancer rate. The most important finding of this study was that the authors concluded that cell phone exposure did not increase the risk of brain cancer. And there was a big caveat, however. Basically, their study suggested that groups exposed to the most amount of cell phone or radio frequencies had their risk of developing gliomas slightly increased. However, the authors dismissed this claim because they said that there was a sampling potential bias since some participants reported extraordinary amount of cell phone usage. For example, they reported using their cell phones 21 hours per day or 22 hours per day, and it would not be realistic. That's why the authors were like, perhaps the participants were exaggerating, and in order to take that into consideration, they basically said that we can remove the outliers, and that's how they got the result that cell phone exposure did not increase the risk of brain cancer in humans. So now at the end, we are just going to talk about some effective methods that we came up with to reduce your exposure to radio frequencies. Basically, since the evidence is inconclusive right now, we should stay safe by, for example, limiting children's access to cell phones, because most studies have in fact focused on adults instead of children, and perhaps children could be more susceptible or more at risk of developing diseases such as cancer when exposed to radio frequencies. Furthermore, we can also use the speaker feature on our phones, so the phone is away from our head, and that also could lower the risk and lower the amount of energy that we receive from our phones in the form of radio frequencies. Lastly, we could also always text instead of call when it's not absolutely necessary to keep safe from radio frequencies. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Neurosci IQ. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Thank you.